Welcome into On Texas Football, Talking Up Ball episode. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel, sitting in for Jerry Hamilton. Jerry's on the road, visited with Longhorn quarterback commitment Dia Bell earlier today. He'll have more on that tomorrow for all of us. But for now, we got CJ, who was at the press conference today with Coach Steve Sarkisian. CJ, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Good. Happy Monday night, everybody. I'm glad to be filling in. I don't normally see everybody on a Monday night, so I hope the vibes are high tonight.
They will be well received, I think, coming off of a 27-24 win over a ranked Vanderbilt team in Nashville. Look, we can talk about a number of different things tonight. We're going to go to the chat line and let you guys decide what we talk about a little bit tonight. Hope to take as many questions as possible and get through those, and we'll be with you guys to the top of the hour. CJ, Sark today, you and I discussed this immediately after his presser. Something that I just come back to after thinking about it for a good couple hours here was how happy he was with how his team performed after a couple of difficult games in a row in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma. Very physically demanding, of course, but mentally demanding as well. The very next week, mentally demanding against Georgia, as mentally demanding as a home game can be these days, yet still having the aptitude and faculties to go up to Nashville and take care of business against a plucky Vanderbilt team.
Yeah, of course, anytime you can come away with a road victory in the SEC, you have to be pleased, right? You know, this is a tougher conference. I know Vanderbilt home environment, maybe not what you're going to see anywhere else in the country, or at least in the SEC. But at the end of the day, they had a number by their name, right? That was a good football team. They've been tough to play this year. Already knocked off Alabama. You got to win over Kentucky. You lost in overtime to Missouri. You know, they scrap, they fight, they claw. And they did just that against Texas. And here's the deal, right? It was a 3-point victory for Texas. And I know that second half was very frustrating. I know offensively, a lot of what stalled drives was self-inflicted, but if you don't have a fifth-year senior have one of a mental bust there with the late, roughing the passer, that's a 17-point victory that you're coming home with. That's a bit different of a vibe that we're having right now. Obviously, you can't just play the what-if game, but it's a different vibe. It's a different feel. I thought that Texas game defensively was about as good as we could have expected, given the short fields, given what we know about Diego Pavia and that offense. But, again, it's little things that you can kind of come away with. Positive-wise, I thought that if that penalty wasn't called, if that play wasn't made, and you come home with a 17-point victory, what's the conversation, Bobby? I think it's a little bit different than what we're expecting and having right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, Longhorns had a good game in Nashville. They were not perfect by any stretch, as Sark said today, CJ. But a win is a win on the road. And, we said this in postgame too. Look, they're 7-1. If you can't be happy about 7-1, I don't know what to tell you, Longhorn fans, because I've been around the block, and 7-1 is a good season thus far, because I've seen 5-7 3 years ago. I've seen consecutive losing seasons in the last 10 years. So do not, count your chickens right now. Be happy with where Texas is at right now. And we can go from there. All right, we're going to go to the chat line. Like I said, this is one of those nights where Jerry and I typically, CJ, literally just answer and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Before we get to do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. We'd like to thank John Donovan, President, Longhorn Wealth Management Group. John's a proud Texas Ex's Life member whose wife and 6 siblings, like John, are also UT grads. John's a certified financial planner who spent more than 30 years providing investment advice to Longhorn families and friends across the country. While the victory in Nashville was a bit scary, John hopes all OTF members have a fun Halloween week and enjoy the bye week here. He encourages you all to use this open time to schedule your own free 90-minute consultation with Longhorn Wealth to allow John to help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and secure your legacy. Call John and his team, Longhorn Wealth, 972-707-4900, or go online, longhornwealth.net, to schedule your free consultation today. All right, then, CJ, you ready to get going? let's start with Alan Makeda. Defense is playoff ready. Sark will get the offense right these last 4 games. I think that we agree the defense is playoff ready. They've got to keep healthy. They got to stay healthy. Jelani McDonald was a revelation on Saturday. I think that's fair to say. Jermaine Lole is just coming into his own, and people are starting to see the real benefit of Trey Moore, as well as Alfred Collins, Leon Glafau, Anthony Hill. Just a solid defensive effort overall. My question to you, will Sark get the offense right these last 4 games, CJ?
Well, you can certainly hope. Yeah, I think that is going to be the expectation. It should be, right? You got a veteran quarterback, you got a veteran offensive line. The issues that we're seeing, I think, weren't going to be expected coming into the year because of the strengths of this offense, right? Now you've hit a rut, and it's, again, 3 weeks in a row now where it wasn't smooth sailing with the offense. What can you do to figure out ways to get them rolling? I thought Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers, for the most part, got that offense rolling in that first half, right? 17 straight completions. Talk about how they were completed, whatever. You were moving the ball, 200-plus yards of offense, 3 total touchdowns. I mean, you did well in the first half. Now it's about making that an entire game's worth of offensive production. And again, for the defense, Bobby, to go back to them a little bit, 9 weeks into the season, and we're finding new ways to talk about new faces contributing at a very high level. Leon Glafau, anytime he's on the football field, he's finding ways to create explosive negative plays for opposing offenses, and you have to love that. Jermaine Lole, Alfred Collins, probably their 2 best games back-to-back, dating back to Georgia and now Vanderbilt combined. And you mentioned Jelani McDonald, but I'll go one further. Kobe Black was on the field for 9 snaps, targeted 3 times, and I thought had a heck of a day. He had 2 PBUs, and one of them was going to be a pick 6. Obviously, I mentioned the personal foul negating that, but he's in the right spot. And right now, for these young cats to be contributing at a high level this late in the season, where you normally kind of have the idea of what your personal defensive identity is, and these guys are throwing good, positive wrinkles into it. That's awesome. That's what you want.
Yeah, but the question is, will Sark get the offense right in the last 4 games? Do we think that? Or is that the question? Because that, to me, I think that's the question. I think this is a playoff quality defense.
Yes.
We agree. Okay. Will Sark get the offense right these last 4 games? Can they win 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 to make the playoffs?
That Florida game is going to be huge.
You think Florida game?
I do, because I think Florida has good athletes. When you have good athletes, you're not going to have the yak. You're not going to have the missed tackles in space that we saw against Vanderbilt. If that's the offense that Texas runs the rest of the year, where it's check down, check down, check down, check down, it's tough. You know, it's just tough to rely on 12, 13, 14 play drives against really good quality defenses. There has to be a threat vertically down the field. With that said, I don't like Quinn forcing, because that's not ever been his game down the field. So it's got to be organic. It's got to be ways that's schemed open. And it comes on the shoulders of Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers and that offensive line to give him time. Because that's, again, you can talk about this, Bobby. That's not been a good offensive line the last 2 weeks.
No, it hasn't been a good offensive line, but really the issue, I think, has been in pass protection. They've actually opened some holes in the run game at times when the other team didn't load up the box. But right now, they're having problems with blitzes.
Yes.
I mean, that it's not even normal defense that they're having problems with. I mean, maybe Cam Williams, of the 4 sacks, Cam Williams got beat once. You know, those are going to happen once or twice a game. That's fine. The issues are on blitzes. They're having bad plays on blitzes, and teams are going to do that. So I think that's the seminal question right now. Will Sark have the offense right these last 4 games? So, Alan, your comment, I think, is on the mark, really.
I agree.
Josie, I just wish Longhorn Nation would stop freaking out. This is the SEC. This is how the games are going to be. There is a element of that I would agree with. I also know, having followed the Longhorns for 30-plus years, that fans are going to freak out. I'm going to freak out at times. We all will, based on a variety of things. But I will say this. There is no reason to, based on what I saw on Saturday. I saw a team win a game. They beat Vanderbilt. They didn't luck into the win. They didn't back into it. It could have been worse than it was, yes. So maybe they didn't execute as high. But I saw a Texas team that was focused and went and beat Vanderbilt. They didn't get lucky. The ball didn't
No.
just bounce their way. In fact, the ball probably bounced opposite of their way a couple times. Yet they still went and won. And Sark did a good job, I thought, of pointing that out in the press conference today. Look, this could have been a little different, right? This could have been Texas was really close to making it a different caliber of game when the final scoreboard was tallied.
And I think that's where the frustration comes from a little bit, right? It never felt like that game was ever in true jeopardy, that Vanderbilt got off to a hot start. But after that, Bobby, I mean, when did it feel like they were ever in a controlling position for the game? I would argue they weren't ever, right? Texas immediately answered, got a stop, scored again. It's 14-7. You're sitting back thinking, okay, Texas has found something. They continued to score a little bit on offense, 21-7. And then that's kind of when the wheels started to sputter a little bit. And instead of blowing out a Vanderbilt team in which it looked like they might have been on a path to do so, now it's a one-score game for most of that second half. And that defense has to stand up. The frustration stems from not putting the team away. And I get that. But again, it didn't feel like Texas was ever in a truly vulnerable position in that game.
No, there were a couple. There was one time where they punted back and only had a one-score lead, right? And so, look, I think Texas is in a good shape right now. They played a good, solid, well-rounded game. They didn't put the ball in harm's way or have to, in my opinion. Quinn definitely had two picks, but it wasn't like the game was clearly in doubt. I thought it was a solid road win. To Josie's point, there are going to be SEC games like this. Fans don't need to freak out. We agree with that. But I will add this. When you like a team as much as a lot of people like the Longhorns, things like this are going to happen. Just you got to get used to that too as another fan. All right, in it to Quinn it. Get the offense right, and we're cooking with hot grease. Man, that's one of my dad's favorite sayings, by the way, cooking with hot grease. I will say this. If they get the offense right, what does that look like even right now? That is a big question because to CJ's point, throwing these balls in the flat, that looks good against Vanderbilt. It looks good against Colorado State. Against the better teams, you're going to have to complete those intermediate balls like Quinn did a little bit against Vanderbilt. The ball over the middle to Ryan Wingo was a key minute throw in the game, put him in field goal position to go up by 2 scores. The 3rd and 20 to Silas Bolden was big. The slot fade to DeAndre Moore. Quinn had some nice plays and nice throws in this game. I think to CJ's point, they got to go a little bit further. Got to get a little bit deeper into the route tree if they're going to be really, really good and quote unquote cooking with hot grease.
And to even build on that, you don't need to score on every drive if you're the offense. What you need to do is put your defense in good key situations to have them defend the entire length of the field. And that, to the point that we're trying to make here, is not what's happening, right? You look back at, some of the big scoring drives not even big, but the scoring drives opponents have had recently, they've had to go about 30 yards. And that's not necessarily the key to winning big football games. Thank you, Matthew, for pulling this up. But you see the average scoring drive over the last 10 opponents' scoring possessions against this Texas defense, they've had to go 38 yards to put points on the board. It's not just scoring points for Texas, but it's inning drives with kicks, punts, field goals, PATs. That's what you want. It's been a key of mine the last 3 weeks, and Texas hasn't done a very good job of that, And again, to go 13 yards and add points, that's not good. As good as this Texas defense is, if you give them 60 or 70 yards to work with, they're gonna stand up, right? They're gonna force punts. They're gonna force turnovers. We've seen that way too many times this year. Only 2 drives have extended beyond 50 yards. I'll even go further. Only 2 drives have gone beyond 40 yards before adding points to the board for opponents. It's just about protecting the rock, and that's what Texas needs to get back to doing, and it starts with Quinn and the offensive line.
So that's, in your opinion, getting the offense right in some ways means limiting turnovers.
Absolutely.
Because they have turned it over. How many times are they? 3 consecutive games or 4 consecutive games they've turned it over in the first quarter? Texas has now. Whether that's Arch Manning at the helm or Quinn Ewers, it doesn't matter. So maybe that's part of getting the offense right that we need to be talking about. Hook 'em horns here. Where are Colin Simmons' tackles A lot of snaps, but I wouldn't say no production. Very little production at times. Come on, Frosh. I think that's a little tongue-in-cheek. This was not, even though he had 25 snaps against Vanderbilt. Okay, so he wasn't not out there. I think this was a game where the defensive ends and the Trey Moores of the world, the guys that are going to play a kind of a mix of a linebacker, defensive end hybrid, it was about hemming in the pocket and not letting Diego Pavia's legs beat you. Make him beat you with his arm. Simmons played that same role. Trey Moore's stats, by the way, in this game, I think everybody says, oh, he played a good game. His stats weren't very much in this game.
Right.
And I think Colin Simmons could probably say the same thing.
Colin's been really productive over the last few weeks, right? Georgia, he was all over the field. Oklahoma, same thing. I know that box score maybe wasn't as pretty against Vanderbilt, but I think, again, that was the expectation of the edges, was just to create havoc. You're not going to see true dropbacks from Diego Pavia all too much. They like to move the pocket. They like to run the football. Colin's been fine. Maybe this, again, wasn't the prettiest box score, but those edge rushers, as you mentioned, Bobby, it's just about containment. It's about finding ways to funnel that back inside, and they did a great job, in my eyes, of limiting the explosiveness and the magic of what we've seen with Pavia this season.
Yeah, I look at it. I'm not concerned about stat sheets at all. I feel like people get that wrong when they start talking about defensive players when you're playing within a scheme right now that is working so well for the Longhorns. All right, in it to quit it. Also had this one, good one. I'm going to use your another question of yours here, if you don't mind. Did Sark give any updates on Andrew Makuba and Isaiah Bond? I know we talked about Bond. CJ, you may personally have an update on Makuba.
Yeah, Bond from Sarkisian's press conference this morning. Texas would love to get him back, and he's thought that the idea of getting Isaiah Bond 3 weeks to get fully healthy for Florida obviously would be more beneficial than 2 weeks had he played this weekend against Vanderbilt. Of course, Bond did try to give it a go against Georgia. He was hobbled. He was not 100%. And again, Texas looking at and Sarkisian mentioned this a few times, Texas looking at this as the midway point for the season, which is crazy to say 9 weeks in, 8 games into the game or into the season. For that to be the case, they're going to need some sort of full strength recovery for Isaiah Bond. Need him 100% back on the field, and Texas precautionary with his injury kept him out this weekend. Just wanted to get him back fully healthy. Andrew Makuba will be evaluated during the bye week going into next week as well with Texas as they start preparing for Florida. Of course, Texas very fortunate that was not a long-term season-ending deal with Makuba. But, of course, he did not travel. He did not suit up, did not make the flight to Vanderbilt and Nashville for this game for the Longhorns.
I liked how Sark put it. He said, I wanted to give him 3 weeks instead of just 2 when he was talking about Bond. I got the sense that if Bond really had to go, he could have gone on Saturday. Yeah. And that tells me he's absolutely going to be ready in 2 weeks for Florida. So I feel good about that. And CJ, I know you felt good about Makuba's prognosis almost since the get-go when you figured out, when you heard it necessarily wasn't structural, that the issue was and that he would be able to pop back up. But look, Jelani McDonald, welcome to the team because you made me a believer in one game. Looking forward to your career as a Longhorn for sure. All right, let's look at this, CJ. This one, talk a little recruiting here from Horns fan. Any update on Khalil Lockett? His stats don't seem to be popping off the page like you'd hope for a 5-star high school wide receiver. Our producer, Matt Hutchison, is also going to show us a little footage here of Khalil Lockett this year. CJ, your comments on that?
Yeah, Saxy's it's a talented school. It's not a school that you're going to see incredible pass protection and quarterback play at the moment. Of course, here's a little bit of the after the run ability from Khalil. And I think when you see ways that they get them the rock, you'd like to see plays like this where he is physically and athletically the best player on the field. And that's what we see with the ball in his hands. And Of course, that's limited because of the offensive talent around him at times. For Kalik, again, I don't necessarily look at it in the sense of true production, but the routes run, the physicality in the run game, and then the measurables. Right now, again, we know how talented he is. We see 6'2". We know, and Jerry's mentioned this a few times, Bobby, but 11-inch hands. You don't see that very often at the wide receiver spot. He's got great hands, great ability to catch the football, and the after the catch ability is something that will carry over to the next level because of his athleticism. It's all about getting with him the football, which is something that isn't always very easy to do at Saxey currently. I don't find it a concern. It's just something that, he's going to have to work through at the high school level right now.
Matt, keep these videos up for a little bit. We're going to take another question, but I want to keep I love playing highlight videos of some recruits while people can have something to watch while we're talking separately. Josh Marquette says, it's also good to point out that Sark was pleased with Quinn Ewers. Yes, he was. What I loved about what Sark said today, CJ, he said that, look, very first pass he really throws is intercepted. He could have gone to the sideline. He could have sulked. It could have snowballed on him.
Yes.
Right? Instead, what did he do? Go out and complete, 17 in a row? It doesn't matter where those balls are being thrown. He completed 17 in a row. So I feel like to that point, I really like what Sark had to say on that. All right, Lando Griffin has this one for us. Considering Texas is 7-1, what would you consider a successful season? Playoff win, natty appearance? What do you make of that, CJ? What do you consider a successful season for Texas? I know where I'm at.
A failure of a season would be to not make the college football playoff. And that, again, is coming into the season with a great expected offensive line, a third-year system quarterback, and a defense right now that is amongst the conversation for being one of the best in the entire country. If you don't make the playoff with that, that's a bad year. Bad year. Texas, again, 7-1 and right on path to making the college football playoff. I think folks would be maybe a bit disappointed for a 1-year, one and done in the playoff as well, especially considering that game might be at home. But listen, you got to get to that point where you can prove to be a team that contends for a national championship. And over the last 3 weeks, I would say Texas isn't there yet. A successful season would be a Final Four appearance in my eyes, a semifinal. Again, Texas came into the year right on the cusp of being a top 5 team, right? They were right there. They were number 1 for a little while as well. You got to make the playoff, and I think you got to go around deep for it to be a successful season to me. Be back to where you were a year ago amongst the Final Four teams.
That's interesting. I'm a little bit different because I think it depends on who you play if you make it to the playoffs. But I will say that I'm to the playoffs. Look, you make the playoffs 2 years in a row. Texas may not be the favorite to win the national championship this year. That's my personal opinion. I'm not sure they have what it takes this year to necessarily win the championship, whether that's because of the run game just doesn't have that power run component that we'd like to see. I mean, we all know it now that they lost their power run game this year, right? And so that puts them at a certain disadvantage against some other teams. But making the playoffs is it's a brand of approval. It's a stamp of approval. Excuse me. I feel like that's where this is now. Do you need to be 11-1 to make the playoffs, or can you be 10-2? I'm not sure, but I feel like that is a good season if they can make it back to the playoffs. If they go 10-2, look, I think a lot of people thought that's what they would go in preseason. So, CJ, while you're talking about all this, they were ranked in the top 5 or ended up number 1. You know what? I mean, a lot of people predict. I did. I predicted 10-2 when the season started. So I'm not going to sit here and bemoan the fact that they meet those expectations because I thought they were solid expectations, actually, as well. So that's where I'm at, Lando. Thanks for asking the question as well. CJ, you got a little hat tip here that I want to bring up from Jedi Master Bevo. I've met him before, too. CJ, it was great to meet you last night at the Nashville airport. Thanks for taking some time to talk Texas football. Respect your takes and posts on X. Good stuff, CJ. Always make friends, buddy.
That was awesome.
You're going to need them.
Great to run into you, Jetta Master Bevo. I'm excited to run into everybody else, further down the road as well.
Yeah, it was a good time. We both had a good time at the local on Saturday afternoon, too.
Absolutely.
CJ, that was the great stuff. Enjoyed getting out and talking to people. Jose Rodriguez, Bobby and CJ, with just 4 games remaining and little chance for mistake, how would you rank the 4 games in terms of difficulty? You want to try to do this individually? You want to try to do it together, CJ?
I think we might have the same answer here, Bobby. You want to go least difficult to most?
I would say Kentucky, but least difficult because they're one-sided team.
And they're dealing with a quarterback issue as well. They just haven't pieced it together fully this year. I'm with you.
Okay, so that would be 4 out of 1 to 4. 3, I would go Florida.
Yes, but I think that gap from 4 to 3 is much more significant from 3 to 2 to 1. Florida's looking like they're going to be a pretty potent team. They got athletes defensively, and Lagway's an explosive player on offense. They're gonna be a team that causes some troubles for Texas. Will they beat Texas? I don't think so, but not a team that you can completely look over again.
I've got to add this, CJ, too. They play Georgia this week.
Yep.
That is their rival outside of Florida State. And so they are going to leave a lot on that field, I think. And that could play into the Longhorns' hands. But to your point, you cannot take Florida for granted under any circumstances. Number 2, CJ, look, of all the games left, I actually picked Texas to lose the one that I'm going to put number 2, and that was Arkansas. This is before A&M kind of turned it around a little bit. But the Hogs with Taylon Green have an offense that can score. It's in Fayetteville. Sam Pittman is fighting for his job. There's just a lot of pieces to this puzzle, rekindling a rivalry that's, decades old. I put Arkansas, though, at number 2, and then A&M at number 1. I assume you and I are on the same page there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, I think it's very favorable for Texas that the Arkansas game is an 11 a.m. kick. We'll see if that gets flexed or moved back at all. But we saw what that game was like under the lights a few years ago, and that obviously wasn't pretty for Texas. Different teams, I understand, but that environment stays the same. That hatred remains the same. With the sun still up, birds still chirping in the morning, Bobby, that's a big positive for the Longhorns on the road. And, of course, we just saw what that environment will be like in College Station this weekend whenever Texas goes in November 30th. A&M, listen, say what you want about preseason expectations, about the way that they've gotten to where they are, schedule, throw it out the window, whatever. That's a good football team, and they've impressed, and they're found, the true solution at quarterback. I know that they've jostled a little bit with Weigman and Reed. Listen, Reed brings a different element than Weigman right now, and the way that he's able to create electricity in the quarterback run game, that's going to be a tough game, without a doubt.
It'll be a tough game, but I will say this. Texas may have the defensive ends to stick with a Marcel Reed. That is a positive for Texas if they decide to go in that direction.
And the health, I think, and knock on wood, obviously. I know that's 4 weeks away on the schedule, but you could really tell LSU was missing Harold Perkins and, the star defensive lineman up the middle that was out for the season as well. Guys that could match the speed of a Reed in that offense for A&M. Listen, if Anthony Hill, Leon Lafau, David Benda, if they remain healthy, that's going to be huge for the Longhorns to stymie that.
I just want to say this. If you haven't practiced for the zone read all year and then you're asked to stop it, you've got no chance in game.
That's true.
I mean, that's what happened. I mean, Marcel Reed is a talented player. We all agree with that, CJ. But he threw a total of 2 passes on Saturday in an entire half. They couldn't stop the zone read. And if you have been coached to stop the zone read, you're going to stop it no matter how good the running back is at times.
It's a good point.
More so than a guy has to pass just 2 times all day. So let's – I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but there is some qualifiers in that discussion right now. Al Bundy with a question. Do the Horns have a quality win yet? Do the Horns have a quality win yet? What do you think? Vanderbilt quality win. What are they? 5-3 now. Michigan 5-3, I believe. What's UL Monroe? Did they win this past weekend? Are they 6-1 as well? I don't know. I don't know if Texas has a highlight win other than Michigan early when they kind of knocked them off the pedestal. But you're right, Al. The degree they don't have a elite win. I don't know about quality, but elite win.
Yeah, and I didn't give this kind of discussion too much of a talking point until maybe this past weekend, maybe since the Georgia game. Reason why, you look at the scores there, Texas was doing what they needed to do against bad teams, and that's blow them out, right? 30-point win over Oklahoma. You're up to a 22-point win over Mississippi State. I know that those games weren't pretty, but they weren't close. And that's where I'm sitting there thinking, okay, that's the mark of a good football team. You could tell the on-field production, skill level, whatever, it's a sizable gap. And that's what you want to see when Texas plays bad teams, even against Michigan. Michigan's not a good football team, but you win by basically 20 on the road. You feel good about that. You knew that game was in hand for most of that second half. It was never really in question. Now that you're starting to see Texas struggle a little bit, it does warrant the question of, okay, well, who's the best competition that Texas played really good against? I think that's fair. Defensively, has Texas played an elite offense? Maybe Georgia, maybe Vanderbilt. They still, I know that the short fields hurt them, but what can you take away from those games? So it's a fair point now. Of course, Texas will get tested these next 4 games as well, but it's going to be games that they're going to be needing complementary football to get through, and that was the big issue that we've seen over the last few weeks.
Gotcha. CJ, this one, he was asked a little bit about other players like Jarrett Gibson today. Steve Sarkisian was from D-Mac of Texas. Why is Jarrett Gibson not getting carries? He was also asked about Jonte Cook. He was asked about Sadir Mitchell, Jure Bledsoe, a couple other guys. What was his general take on that entire situation? By the way, Gibson did play on Saturday. He logged 1 snap, and he was coming in, I think, possibly to take a short yardage, but then ended up not doing it. What's the whole idea behind not only Gibson but some other guys right now? What was Sark's answer to that?
Holistically, it's everybody's on their own path of development, right? And it was pretty interesting and individually for Gibson that we saw him a lot early in the year, right? You got multiple carries against Michigan, was one of your leading rushers early in the year, and I believe week 1. So we've seen him and seen what he can do at times in that running game. Haven't yet seen him in SEC play, at least in extended snap count. Again, it's all about earning the trust of the coaching staff, and that's what you're seeing right now with a Jonte Cook. That's what you're seeing right now with an Amari Niblack, who made a return to the field for the first time. It's, can the staff trust you when you're on the field? Gibson had a fumble earlier this year. Cook had a big drop against Mississippi State. Amari Niblack, again, another holding that we've seen from him. I believe he's accounted for 3 or 4 penalties this year when on the field, and that's not been a lot of snaps. So can the staff trust you when on the field to not create a bad play into a big negative play? That's the big key there. My thing is, if it's trust with Gibson, and it's one of those things where it's don't know if he's going to be blocking the right gap or fitting the right pass protection, I would argue who is in that running back room right now. So
yeah, there's an element of that for sure. Sark blamed one of the sacks on the running backs today. Didn't name a name, but I think I know who it was. My thought on all of this, whether it's Jarrett Gibson or whomever, is look, this is a meritocracy. Sark he's shown that. I mean, if he thinks you deserve to play, he's going to play it. I'd also take exception, CJ, with your comment on Amari Niblack, just because of this. That play was not designed to go outside the tight end and cut back across. That's going to be called holding 9 times out of 10. The real problem there was Trey Wisner didn't stay on the front side to make the first down. He tried to make a home run with what he saw instead of just getting the first down. All right, Justin Yarbrough. How different is wide receiver separation in comparison to last year? Man, this is a good question, Justin. To y'all, does it seem like guys were more open last year? It's hard. I want to say this. Silas Bolden was pretty open over the middle, right? Ryan Wingo was pretty open over the middle. I think it's depending on the routes. And I will add this. Xavier Worthy is looking open in the NFL right now. So he makes Xavier had a way of doing that because he ran a 4.2 140. And I don't care how fast anybody else on this roster is, including Isaiah Bond. They're not Xavier Worthy in that regard.
That's a good point.
You know, do you feel like they're not as open? Like Matt, I can see where Justin's coming from with that. What do you think?
I would have to go back and watch some 2023, Bobby, but does it feel to you at all that opposing defenses are playing this offense differently? Because I made the point earlier on the winning drive that all we've talked about all offseason coming in with this Texas team was this was going to be the fastest, most complete, deepest team group of pass catchers Texas would have under Steve Sarkisian. What does that mean for opposing defenses when that's the theme, the whole kind of perception of the offense is, oh, shoot, we got to back up our defense. We got to make sure that we don't get beat deep. And I think that's what we saw at times with Vanderbilt. We saw it earlier in the year, right, with Colorado State, ULM guys saying basically, hey, have what you want up front. Just know that you're not going to go get the 80-yard touchdown over the top of us. And that's where you saw the opening for the checkdowns, the underneath, the screens, the bubbles, whatever you want to say. That's why this average distance of target conversation that's kind of sparked up over the last 48 hours is a bit misleading. Because if Vanderbilt's going to give Gunnar Helm 15 yards to work with in the flat, you're going to take that, right? He's a good guy after the catch. I think it's a little different than what we're seeing defenses play this offense in the past.
They saw a lot of 3-high last year. They're seeing a lot of 2-high this year. And the reason they're seeing that is because they don't have the banger at running back, in my opinion.
Yes.
You don't have not only do you not have Cedric Baxter, you don't have Jonathan Brooks. And so when you don't have both of those guys, they'll play 2 back a little bit on you and let those guys try to get tackled for 4 or 5 yards instead of the 8 or 9 that Jonathan Brooks was running from because he's a little bit stronger through a point of contact.
That's a good point.
I do think that they're playing them differently. I think that that's fair to say that. I also think it's fair to say in the SEC, you're not going to see a lot of 3-high because they don't want to give you anything in the run game. they are going to load up and try to go. But I think Justin's right. I mean, they're not running wide open necessarily as much. This one from Dan. At least you're not OU. Could be worse. Look, I want to take this moment to talk about that, actually, because I don't know who all was able to see the Oklahoma-Ole Miss game this weekend. It was a pedestrian win for Ole Miss. Now, the game, like Texas versus Vanderbilt, was never really truly in doubt for Ole Miss, but it just seemed like Ole Miss was the better team, and they won through attrition almost. Okay? I feel like those are some of the games you're going to see in the SEC. It are those kind of games. And I've got to be honest. I mean, they'll beat Maine this weekend. Do not be surprised if OU finishes 5-7 because this will likely be their last win of the year. And we'll see what they decide to do with everything else going on there at offensive coordinator and even at quarterback. Are they going to be able to keep Jackson Arnold and or Michael Hawkins, who's now been yanked, happy? I mean, what are they going to do? I don't know. MJF here. To the extent the O-line is having communication problems, what or who is the biggest concern? Have you heard how they plan to fix it? Sark talked a little bit about that, and he was not willing to say it was just the offensive line.
Yeah.
Completely unwilling to say that. You agree with that, CJ?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pass protection is an entire group, entire unit ordeal, right? It's not just the offensive line, it's your tight ends, it's your running backs, and it's on Quinn to get the ball out at times, right? You know, I know that Georgia, that was the game where a lot of pressures occurred because of holding on to the ball, maybe pump faking a little bit. But Texas had 2 holding penalties on its running back or on its tight ends. It's second straight game where a running back didn't fit where they were supposed to that resulted in a sack. So, yeah, I think the offensive line gets some unfair criticism at times, but they absolutely need to play better, without a doubt. It's not been that level of Joe Moore that we wanted to see, after Michigan and going into SEC play. It's been very lackluster.
All right. A couple other questions I want to get to here. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor one more time. Each and every Monday night Talkin' Ball brought to you by our friend John Donovan at Longhorn Wealth Management. John's a proud UT alum, serving 15 years as a Dallas, Texas Exes board member, now helping lead the build-out of the Collin County Texas Exes chapter. John wants to remind everyone that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. John is offering all OTF fans a free 90-minute private consultation to help you determine if your health and wealth protections financially are appropriately and adequately in place. Call John and the Longhorn Wealth team at 972-707-4900 or go online to www.longhornwealth.net to schedule your free private consultation today. John's got 30 years experience as a certified financial planner. All right, CJ, let's go to this one. This one from MJF. MVP versus Vandy. As to the player that went above and beyond expectations the most, Jelani McDonald. He was the perceived weak link, the one we thought Vandy would exploit. I would have to agree with that if you're talking about a surprise MVP.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about overall MVP, man, I don't know how you can take it out of Michael Taft's hand. He was named Michael Taft named SEC co-defensive player of the week this week.
He was everywhere. I mean, interception, forced fumble, PBU in the end zone. Heck of a day. A heck of a leader for that Texas defense as well. And I have to imagine, knowing Michael Taft, knowing a little bit about Jelani McDonald, I got to see both of them work out this summer. They communicate very well. They know each other very well, right? They're two Central Texas products. They train together with Band Performance down in the Austin area. They work very well with one another. I don't know if Jelani has the day that he does if it's with any other safety in that secondary room. And that's not to say that there's a deficiency or a lack of cohesion there, but the way that they work well together, I think, is a testament to the communication between Michael Taft and the ability for Jelani McDonald to understand a game plan and kind of what the scheme asks of him, and then to trigger, right? The first drive of the game for Vanderbilt, in 30, about the 25-yard line, they run a triple option to the field. Before that ball is pitched, Jelani McDonald is screaming downhill because you see a Manny Muhammad on the weak side and a Michael Taft on the weak side. Each signal with their arms, go, go, go. Makes a tackle up the line of scrimmage for maybe a loss of a half of a yard, but it's that kind of level of communication, breakdown, and instincts for Jelani that I think makes him a heck of a football player, and Taft certainly helps playing next side to him.
This one from KD35. Bobby and CJ, do you think Quinn's injury is a nagging injury? They will never be 100% the rest of the season, or it's finally going away? I think it ebbs over time is the hope, unless there's a re-injury. Do I think there is some nagging level of involvement there? I would be highly surprised if there's not. It's almost like you have a sprained ankle, and even though you can play on it over time, it keeps getting better and better and better unless you re-injure it.
Right.
That would be my comment on that. I like this question a lot too. I want to talk to Bob Shipley and Brian Irwin about this for tomorrow's lunch with the coach. Nathan Larson asks, does Sark's scheme allow the defense to show the hand pre-snap, or can it be adjusted to help pass protect, like wider formations and not as tight? This is one of the things that we talked about. I mean, when you have these squeezed splits, CJ, it allows for more players to be closer to the line of scrimmage, particularly blitzers. And, it's more confusion perhaps for the offensive line and pass protection, like your running backs even.
Yeah, it's interesting, right, in the sense that it does feel like that offensive line, that pocket does kind of cave in a little bit more than you would figure against a 3 and a 4-man rush. Maybe it is splits. Maybe it is just not receiving some chips from tight ends or running backs, whatever might be the instance on a given snap. But, that's one of those football theories that, to hear from Coach Shipley or Rod or you, Bobby, in the sense of what you see from a given formation. Listen, I've thought that the protection has kind of taken a step back at times. There's been pressure on Quinn throughout the year, but not as consistent as what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. And that's not what you want when you have to go on the road to Arkansas and Texas A&M coming up. So It's something that needs to be addressed in this offseason, in this bye week. And fortunately, they're going to have plenty of opportunities to get right watching film and on the practice field.
All right, South end zone Queen is Broughton out for the next game because of targeting. No, he's not out for the next whole game. He is out for the first half of the Florida game. Really unfortunate because, frankly, I felt like he was playing really well. And that penalty came at the exact wrong time because Kobe Black would have had a touchdown on that interception return. Ryan Nelson with a good comment here too. Bobby and CJ, in November, the toughest month and longest month of the season. This is truly the meat of the SEC schedule. We just went down it a few minutes ago. A&M, Arkansas, Florida, and Kentucky. Those are all teams that have one thing or another that make you worried. Kentucky, we just said that we think the fourth toughest team of that group is Kentucky. Well, guess what? They have 3 all-conference caliber defensive players.
At all 3 levels.
Yeah. And so even though they've struggled on offense, they bring a certain element of toughness to this schedule. I mean, no two ways about it. And CJ, you and I, we talked about preseason. Maybe the Kentucky game's the trap game because it's before A&M.
Play Georgia tough.
Yeah. So
hey,
look, we agree, Ryan.
On the bright side, opening the month of November with the bye week, very important.
Yeah. All right. This one from MJF. What happened to Sark's opening script of 15 to 20 plays? Is he still scripting or playing it by ear from the start because defenses are consistently starting games with new looks? What's he said about that in press conferences, CJ?
You know, it's not really been a topic of conversation as of late from Sarkisian, and I've continued to pound the drum that Texas needs to be better on the opening drive, right? Another interception on the first drive of the game. Texas now 6 of 22 in terms of scoring touchdowns on the first drive of games dating back to the beginning of 2023. But in Sark's defense here, you know, if that script does continue to leak out to about 20 plays or so, hey, I mean, Texas did well after that first drive, right? 2 consecutive scoring drives afterward. They found a rhythm. They were in positions to score even more. You score 21 points in the first half. I don't think anyone's going to be upset with that. That's on pace for 42. You take that in a game on the road. With that said, Texas hasn't helped itself. And Rick Ambergy points it out very well, right? It's very tough when you're starting at your own 8-yard line because you return a kick to the 15, you have a holding call, right? You know, that kind of throws the script off of what it's expected to do if you start that at the 25 or even get a return out to the 30. So that's tough. Again, this whole game for me was about stubbing your toe. Texas was never in doubt to lose this game, but they did make it very difficult, and a lot of that was because of the self-infliction, and that's where that script can get off course a little bit.
All right, this one, super chat. Thank you, Jose. Bobby and CJ, what is the most rabid opposing fan base y'all have encountered while at a UT road game? Rabid or obnoxious and rude? Rabid, I would think Oklahoma. And as rude as they could be at the Cotton Bowl, there is no fan base I've ever encountered as obnoxious as Ohio State.
Oh,
But it's not close. Like A&M fans are fairly, and believe it or not, they're fairly tame, except when they get together. You know, it's like in the stands. Yeah, OU in the Cotton Bowl can be rabid, I think, but Ohio State fans just, you know, crude, rude, obnoxious, name it all. I mean, I really, it was. And not just up in Columbus, but also in Scottsdale or wherever we were, Glendale, for the Fiesta Bowl there. Just, yes. Well, Texas Tech doesn't, Rick says more than Texas Tech. Texas doesn't have enough fans to be in that category. No offense.
No,
Not enough. They have a bunch of, like, to me, not trying to be rude. It's just, when you start talking about most, that's what I think of. What about you, CJ?
Yeah, I mean, I've only been to a few true road games for Texas. The 2 that come to mind were Texas Tech going up to Lubbock. Night game, I believe, was 2019 when Lil Jordan Humphrey had the reception late in that game to seal the deal. And then 2021 up in Fayetteville, you kind of put the 2 and 2 together there. Those are, not easy places to play under the lights in Lubbock and Fayetteville, and their fans certainly had an all day to prepare for those games. So it makes those environments pretty tough, and you never know what you might hear, see, or be a part of.
I will say, to your point about Fayetteville, people that are older than me in that really went to UT in the 70s, early 80s, maybe even the 60s, they would have answered Arkansas and not thought twice about this. Not necessarily from the rabid, but from the obnoxious. Rabid fans is kind of a different category, right? I think that's a good one. What did you have there? Matt put up something and I didn't read it. I'm sorry about that, Matt. Randy Jones, whiskey bottles thrown, batteries, coins, RVs trying to run you over if you wear burnt orange. Experience all of that and more at Arkansas. Thanks for that, Randy, to kind of give us that feel. All right. We're going to finish with this one tonight, guys. We're at the top of the hour here, and it's time for us to get going. Why isn't anyone, especially the coaches, addressing the number of penalties from the offensive line, especially number 56, who has 2 to 3 false starts every week? I don't know that he had a false start against Vanderbilt. It was Hayden Connor who had the false start. And that being said, he has had penalties. The personal foul penalty on Saturday was not a good one, but look, they are addressing it. To act like they aren't, Mr. Miller, is just not reality. I think it's a little melodramatic to say it. But Sark talked a little bit about it today, and the thing that is really troublesome to Sark and to me as someone that watches these games closely is how big the penalties were on 4 of the 5 holding calls against Vanderbilt on Saturday. CJ, they were on runs that were for more than 10 yards,
right?
Or they were explosive runs. And so it wasn't a 10-yard penalty. It was a 20-yard penalty, effectively. That is really difficult, especially when Texas was trying to put space between itself and its opponent.
Stubbing your toe, back to the point, it's all self-inflicted. Vanderbilt, good football team, they weren't beating Texas one-on-one. It was Texas trying to do too much, trying to hold that block a little too long, trying to make, enforce their will a little bit too much. And as a result, frustration occurs. And that's where Texas, again, they just stub their toe too often. I went through it earlier today, Bobby, and this is the last point I wanted to make. The final 5 drives for Texas offensively, you could argue that there was one snap in which Texas was ahead of the chains. And what do I mean by that? Second and medium, third and short, they played ahead of the chains. That's one snap. That's not good. That's really not good. That I'm looking at it. The final 4 drives, you got a 2nd and 6. You convert that, immediately you go to 1st and 10, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 9. After that, you got a 3rd and 1. You're ahead of the chains. You did well. Holding penalty. Back up, 3rd and 11. You get sacked. Final 2 drives, you're in 2nd 19, 3rd and 19, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 9. You're not helping yourself there. And then the second to last offensive possession of the night, 1st and 20, 2nd and 19, 3rd and 9.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, how did they end up 9 of 15 on 3rd downs?
It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. So they were better than some people thought in the passing game, in my opinion, a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
Stark also ran 2 power runs on 3rd and longs that were both successful, by the way. I thought that was worth noting. All right, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you to CJ Vogel, as well as to all of you for joining us. We appreciate y'all very much. We got coffee and football coming tomorrow, lunch with the coach. I got a lot of stuff coming up for you guys. Please join us over on ontexasfootball.com if you want to talk with other Texas football fans during the day or when we're not on here. Again, that's ontexasfootball.com. Make sure you visit the message boards and talk with CJ, myself, Jerry Hamilton, Blake Monroe, and others. For CJ, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchison, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good night. Enjoy Monday Night Football. Hook 'em.